And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
It's March 2009, and Battlestar Galactica, the reimagined series, has just ended. Regardless of what you might think of the finale, some hated it, some loved it, there's no doubt that many people loved the show when it started, really enjoyed it, especially the first season of the show and the miniseries that preceded that. And so, Battlestar Galactica, the board game, was inevitable. I mean, whenever there's a successful TV show, there's always going to be a board game of that. But this one had two good things going for it, really. One, it was published by Fantasy Flight Games, and their record for board games is quite high. And the other was designed by Corey Konieczka, who designed Tide of Iron and a few other games that has a very high profile in game design. Battlestar Galactica is a semi-cooperative game in which players are working together to get the fleet to Kobol, which is one of the first stops in the series that they get to. But there are a few players, maybe more than a few, who are Cylons, enemy robots. Now, some of this might not be making any sense to you, and if that's the case, I would maybe caution you to at least try the game out, because this game is going to be most exciting for people who enjoy the series. Here we see the board, Battlestar Galactica. The ship itself makes up the main part of the board, but there also is Colonial 1, and there are 4 dials up here. Now these dials show different resources of the ship. This one shows fuel. You run out of fuel, you die. This has food. You run out of food, you die. You run out of morale, you die. You run out of population, you die. Here are some places for Cylons to hang around. This shows how far your ship is preparing to make a jump, where boarding parties can go. And you see the Viper Bay over in the other corner. But for most of the game, most of the action is going to take place on Battlestar Galactica itself, or at least around it. Now, at the beginning of the game, each player is going to pick a character from the show. These are characters, most of them are very main characters who had some main actions on the show, and it doesn't matter whether or not they were a Cylon on the show, because in this game, anybody can be a Cylon, and some people have a better chance of it than others. Each of these characters also has their own special ability, and so that also adds a little bit to the fun. But what really matters is drawing. Each player gets one of these cards at the beginning of the game, which they keep secret, which will tell you either wonderfully, you are not a Cylon, or unfortunately, it will say, you are a Cylon. Now, if you're a Cylon, you're trying to sabotage the other players. You don't want them to win, because if they die, you win. If you aren't a Cylon, though, you are trying your best to root out the players who are Cylons and, I guess, basically survive. Each turn, players will be moving their characters around the different ships and taking different actions on the spaces, because, as the game goes by, eventually enemy ships are going to show up, the battle base stars from the enemy, and then raiders and other ships are going to be attacking, not so much Battlestar Galactica, but they'll be attacking colonial ships, which can destroy fuel and population from the fleet. And so players themselves are going to come out in their own spaceships and fight them off and send off and fight the enemy ships, but knowing the fact that there's always some players who are Cylons in the game. And if you jump away, you might escape the ships for a little while, but they will come back. They will come back and try and get you. So players are doing all this, and every turn, a new crisis card is drawn, and this crisis card might show that an enemy fleet comes and attacks, or it might ask the player to make a tough decision. And this decision is almost always negative consequences on both sides, and so then players are playing little cards that they receive each turn that are engineering, piloting, tactics, leadership, and political cards, and all the players throw these cards into one big mix, and then one of these cards these cards are drawn to get a total, and if that total is enough to succeed in the challenge, everybody cheers. If not, everyone tries to figure out who didn't contribute enough or who actually contributed negatively to the challenge. This is a lot of fun. All of this, with all the pieces and all the board, really does look confusing, and for me to properly explain the game, it would take more time than what I'm doing right now. However, once you play the game, everything makes thematic sense, and it's a lot of fun, but what really makes the game interesting is the level of suspicion that's in the game. If Chief Tyrell doesn't contribute towards a certain crisis, saying that, well, he would contribute, he just doesn't have the resources. Or if Laura Roslin throws Tara Thrace into the brig and she says she's convinced she's a Cylon, did she do that because she's a Cylon herself? And you have these things. Or if the Admiral, he decides that he's going to jump into deep space, which causes everyone to lose 1 fuel and 1 morale, but it gets you closer to the planet, everyone's going to accuse him of trying to lose that morale and fuel. But if he picks a shorter planet, which actually loses 1 fuel but has a chance of gaining more fuel, everyone will accuse him of taking too long to get to Kobol. That added to the tension, every single thing you do, no matter where you move, no matter what cards you play, no matter how you talk, no matter what character you are playing, people are going to accuse you. They're going to be suspicious of every move you make, and that's the underlying theme of the game. It's very difficult for the humans to win. It's not impossible, but I would say they win only 1 out of 3 or 4 times. So if you're a Cylon, you have a bit of an easier time of it. Not to mention, halfway through the game, everyone draws another one of these cards. So you may have been a human for the first half and suddenly become a Cylon for the second half, which really makes things interesting. And everyone is, once again, their suspicions are reignited, and the whole game just becomes a close race to the finish. Every time I've seen the humans win, it's been an amazing finish, and they just eke it out, just like the TV show. In my mind, Battlestar Galactica is certainly in the running for the best game of 2008. It was just a fantastically produced game with wonderful components, but the level of tension that this game provides is unlike anything else I've ever felt. Not for one moment in any of the games that I played was I even remotely bored, because every player's decision, everything that people decided, I really cared about. I was constantly studying other people with a psychological, trying to figure out were they a Cylon, or if I'm a Cylon, trying to keep that from the other players. The whole back and forth. There's a very popular game, Werewolf, or Mafia, like some people call it. And this game feels like a cross between that and other popular cooperative games like Shadows over Camelot, and just really good. The negative things about the game are it does take a while to play. Most games last about 3 hours, sometimes longer. It's best with more players than not. And if you don't like the idea of being treacherous and deceitful, this may not be for you. But the positives, to me, far outweigh that. Even if you have never seen a series before, you can still play the game. But having seen the series, this game is Battlestar Galactica in a box, at least the first season. And it's just tremendously fun. A great time has had by all, and it will be one of those games where you look back and say, remember that time when Bob was a Cylon and no one knew it, and we all thought it was Sam, and we're positive it was Sam. Just great moments and great timing. The fleet jumping at a certain time, it recreates the tension of the show, and if you like the show at all, try this game out.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.